I discover my wife's affair after 3.5 years, so I vanished without a word. I sat in the early morning light, the kitchen table a battlefield strewn with remnants of our shared life, empty plates, a coffee-stained newspaper, and a single wilting flower. Its petals sagged in resignation, much like my spirit. The sun streamed in through the window, illuminating the dust particles floating through the air while casting stark shadows on the walls, echoes of the voices that once filled this space with laughter. Somehow, the warmth that kissed my skin felt foreign, tinged with an icy disconnect. Today was supposed to be a fresh start, a day of resolve, but instead, I was riddled with doubt. I replayed the past few months in my mind like a broken record, trying to fit the pieces together of a life I was told would be full of joy. I remembered how Emma's infectious laughter had drawn me in, how she had effortlessly commanded the attention of everyone around her. At that summer cookout, I had marveled at how she seemed to embody the very spirit of life and possibility. We had shared dreams of travel and late-night stargazing, our futures painted in vivid colors on the canvas of our hopes. But like a tapestry unraveling, those threads of love had frayed, revealing the emptiness beneath. With every hour that ticked by, I felt the walls of our home closing in on me. Emma rarely graced these rooms anymore. The hum of her absence was deafening. I would go to bed with the ghost of her scent still lingering, but the warmth would dance away with the dawn, replaced by the coldness of solitude. There was an unspoken truth behind her countless late nights and business trips, an elephant in the room that neither of us dared to acknowledge. It was as if we were living parallel lives under the same roof, drafting separate narratives filled with apathy and disappointment. The sound of her keys jangling in the lock startled me. Emma stepped through the door, her face the carefully constructed mask of neutrality. "Hey, love," she chirped, but it felt hollow, devoid of the resonance we once shared. She was dressed in the sleek attire of someone ready to conquer the world, her tailored blazer radiating authority, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was staring at a stranger. There was always a hint of fatigue etched into her brow, a testament to the relentless chase of success that had become her refuge. "Late night?" I asked, trying to mask the bitterness that rose inside me, like bile threatening to spill. I wanted to pull her into my arms, to whisper the words that danced just beyond the tip of my tongue, but I needed answers instead. "Yeah, just a last-minute meeting," she replied, avoiding my gaze. The tension in the air crackled with unspoken words, and as she headed for the coffee maker, I felt the distance between us stretch taut. I took a breath, grounding myself in the moment, and finally summoned the courage to confront the jagged edges of our reality. "Emma, we need to talk about us. I feel I don't know, like I'm losing you." Her eyes darted up, and for just a fraction of a second, sorrow flashed across her features. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the cool veneer of defensiveness. "You've always been the sensitive one, haven't you?" she replied lightly, a dismissive tone lacing her words, as if my feelings were overly dramatic petals held together by fragile stems. I could feel my heart harden at her words, morphing the hurt into anger. "This isn't about being sensitive, Emma. I just need to know what's wrong. I can't pretend everything is okay when..." My voice trailed off, weighed down by the gravity of what I couldn't put into words. The truth swam in the periphery, barely beneath the surface, chasing me relentlessly, whispering secrets that dared me to acknowledge them. The silence between us was a deafening roar, the kind that makes you believe there is hope lurking, if only you dare to break it. But instead of an awakening moment of revelation, Emma retreated, wrapping herself in a wall of defiance. "I'm just busy," she said sharply, pouring herself a cup of coffee, the clinking of ceramics striking like a clock ticking down to inevitable despair. I felt like I was adrift, powerlessly watching the tide of our marriage pull further from the shore. And as she settled at the table, her fragility replaced with annoyance, all I could do was swallow down a knot of hurt lodged in my throat. I had always believed that love meant confronting the uncomfortable, sharing your vulnerabilities like sacred offerings. Yet here I was, desperately seeking connection, only to meet her with retreat. When Emma finally spoke again, it was to scold me for assuming the worst. "If you could realize that my work is important to me," she started, but I cut her off, unable to suppress the indignation bubbling inside me. "I realize that. But what about us?" The question hung in the air like a fading echo, and for a moment, I could see her breath catch in her throat. It was just enough of a crack for me to glimpse what lay beneath that carefully crafted exterior. But the flicker went unnoticed, swallowed by her tendency to sidestep emotional confrontation. Instead, she changed the subject, diving into trivialities, and with every meaningless word, I felt my heart retreat further into the shadows of despair. The following hours stretched out interminably, filled with forced conversations and half-smiles over meals that tasted like ash. I was left to my thoughts, plagued by the gnawing certainty that something deeper was unfolding behind the mask she wore daily. I was desperate for that closeness again, for the warmth of her laughter, and the dance of our conversations under those string lights that once hung low like a promise in summer's embrace. But the weeks turned into months, and I began to doubt whether that familiar light would ever return. Then came February 2018, a cold morning etched in my memory, a day that started with a flicker of glimmers but would end with a revelation that felt like a punch to the gut. In my search for understanding, for some piece of Emma that would anchor me amidst the chaos, I stumbled into truth, mounted on shaky terrain. I opened her car door that morning, finding the delicate fabric nestled beneath the seat, her bra, a small but potent testament to a life I didn't recognize. The floodgates burst as the world swirled around me, and every moment of denial fell apart, leaving me standing at the precipice of our marriage, tiptoeing between love and betrayal, wondering how I would ever manage to fall back into clarity from such a steep and dizzying height. On an otherwise ordinary evening, Emma left to meet friends at a local bar, her laughter filling the hall as she slipped into her coat, a melody unfamiliar to my ears. I remained rooted in my chair, eyes trained on her while my heart twisted in my chest, heavy with an absence I couldn't quite name. There was a dull ache inside me, a gnawing sense of dread that bolstered my growing suspicion. I had felt the coldness of our connection drifting away, and the thought of her laughing with someone else sent a bolt of jealousy through my veins. In that moment, reckless instinct took the reins, pushing me into an irrational spiral. I grabbed an old phone lying in a drawer like relics of a past I wished to reclaim and downloaded a tracking app that had once seemed rather trivial. My breath quickened with the expansion of my heart, pounding like a war drum as I stepped outside into the cooling dusk. The street lamps flickered on one by one, but the glow from the headlights felt insufficient to illuminate the path that lay ahead. As I approached the bar, I replayed every hollow confession and fleeting glance between us, each insignificant moment now weighed down by monumental significance, transforming an evening out with friends into a web of disquiet. I parked across the street and shut off the engine, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the steering wheel, the grip firming like a lifeline, tethering me to sanity amid impending doom. The bar pulsed with laughter and a kaleidoscope of voices, spilling into the night like vibrant echoes of a world I no longer belonged to. Sitting in the inconspicuous darkness of my car, my heart raced as I collected myself, staring through the tinted windows into the welcoming hum of the people, a stark contrast to the emptiness gnawing at my insides. And then I saw him. A man with a tailored suit that spoke of confidence, confidence so foreign to me now. His posture was relaxed yet assertive, a sharp contrast to the thinning resolve that wrapped itself tightly around my chest. I felt the color drain from my face, the world reducing to a single point of focus as I watched Emma lean in closer, her smile glowing as bright as the neon lights above, a radiant facade masking the underlying treachery. My breath hitched in my throat like a soul snatched from its vessel. I was frozen, rooted to the ground, grappling with a whirlwind of emotions, jealousy simmering alongside disbelief. It felt surreal, like watching an elaborate play unfold with characters I once considered mine, now exuding warmth and intimacy I feared I would never know again. Their laughter intertwined with music, a melody my heart could not resonate with. I thought I would scream, but found only the blistering silence encasing me, every moment laced with bitterness. A joyous connection unfolded before my eyes, yet all I could perceive was the darkness inching closer, suffocating me with despair. And then they leaned in, intimate kiss that tasted of betrayal, and I recoiled, feeling the hard thud of love shatter beneath the pressure of truth. Despair coiled within me like a serpent, forcing me to escape the suffocating reality I couldn't change. Slipping out of the car felt like shedding a skin I once wore proudly. I fled into the night with the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies on my shoulders, the echoes of their connection ringing in my ears, mocking me with every step. The town whizzed by in a blur, familiar streets morphing into a map of isolation and pain as I drove through endless winding roads, searching for solace in the emptiness beyond. I parked at an old tavern, a place that once nestled laughter and companionship in its warm embrace. I stepped inside, and the scent of aged wood and spilled beer hit me like a wave. It was an alien world filled with unfamiliar faces and muted conversations. This was not a place meant for heartbreak or betrayal, and yet here I was, a misplaced soul seeking refuge from the storm inside. I sat at the bar, each sip of whiskey dulling the edges of my anguish, while the din of life chattered around me, all vibrant hues that I felt fading into shades of gray. It was there that a stranger named Reek crossed my path, his presence commanding, with an understated strength that caught me off guard. "I've seen that look before," he said, his voice low yet confident, as though he'd uncovered some universal truth buried beneath the skin of strangers. "You look like you're carrying something heavy." I glanced at him, momentarily surprised by his candor, but found myself spilling secrets like wax from a melted candle, pouring out my heart as he leaned in, listening intently. Between hiccups of tears and sips of whiskey, I confessed the enormity of my fears, the betrayal I had witnessed carving deep lines of anguish across the canvas of my heart. Reabsorbed my words, his expression shifting from sympathy to understanding, and as he spoke, I felt compassion unfurling into the void left by Emma's absence. "Sometimes, the hardest truth to accept is that love can twist into something unrecognizable," he shared, the wisdom of experience painted on his tired face. "It's not about the love you've lost. It's about reclaiming yourself from the ashes." His words resonated, penetrating the fog enveloping my mind, igniting a spark of resilience I'd thought extinguished. Perhaps this stranger was right. I needed to let the storm roll over me and emerge from its fury, reborn from the debris of our shattered connection. My heart felt heavy, yet in that heaviness was the germination of something new, a burgeoning strength born from recognizing the fragility of love and the necessity of survival. As the night deepened, the tavern became my cocoon of clarity, filled with the sound of laughter, yet bearing witness to my silent tears. I realized that perhaps the pain I felt was not the culmination of love lost, but the catalyst for finding who I was without Emma. I didn't know where this path would lead, but it was clear. I had to reclaim my own narrative, to step back from the darkness and into the light, regardless of whether Emma's apology would ever reach me. And so, clutching that truth closely, I resolved to confront the future that awaited me beyond the haze of betrayal. As the days slipped by in that heavy silence, the atmosphere in our apartment transformed into an oppressive weight, one that neither of us dared to acknowledge openly, yet it loomed over us like a thick fog. Each evening when Emma returned, her demeanor felt poised yet evasive, an unsettling elegance that masked her inner turmoil. Her once warm smile was now a brittle facade, tinged with the severity of unspoken words that lingered in the air, choking out any semblance of affection that had once united us. In attempts to bridge the growing chasm, I took to cooking her favorite meals: braised short ribs simmered in red wine, her cherished garlic mashed potatoes, and decadent chocolate lava cake. I poured my heart into each dish, spicing the pots with both nostalgia and a desperate need to ignite a flicker of the intimacy we had lost. Our dinner table, once a bastion of laughter and shared dreams, felt instead like a battleground. I watched her pick at the food, her eyes downcast while I attempted to spark conversations. Despite my efforts, our exchanges felt like pulling teeth, every question met with reluctance, every comment spiraling into an awkward silence, like echoes fading in an empty room. The moment I broached the subject of a rumor I'd heard, that she was seen out late with someone who didn't glow with the same familiarity our love once radiated, the air shifted. "It was nothing," she snapped, her incredulous voice cutting through the tension like a knife. There was a disjointed quality to her reaction, a jarring contrast to the affection I desperately sought, and it tugged at the frayed edges of my heart. I retreated to the couch, my sanctuary quickly transforming into a prison of my own making. As I sat there, staring into the void of our softened couch, fleeting glances of our once vibrant life together danced in my memory. I recalled sunnier days, our fingers entwined, cheeks flushed with laughter. We had built a beautiful tapestry of experiences, the matching mugs we'd snagged from that little shop on Elm Street, photos of us in wild laughter during vacations that seemed trapped in frames of lingering joy. I thought of the codes we had shared, late-night conversations that stretched on until dawn broke. Yet now, all of it twisted into a painful reminder of betrayal, a living testament to the love that was slowly unraveling before me. The emotional weight of her lies pressed down on me, each unacknowledged moment festering in the corners of my soul. Guilt mingled with sorrow, and I felt myself spiraling deeper into despair, slowly emerging into the realization that I needed to break free from this toxic cycle. As each moment passed, I felt my resolve harden, crystallizing around the notion of escaping the life we had built, a feeling both terrifying and liberating. Whispers of doubt crept into my mind. The man I saw at the bar was now an unrelenting specter that stalked me in quiet moments. What if he was the man from the rumor? What if he whispered sweet nothings into her ear while I toiled in our shared agony? I could scarcely breathe, The gnawing anxiety filled me with an icy dread that set my heart racing. One evening, while the weight of silence thickened around us, I felt a surge of defiance. I stood in the kitchen, intent on making her the one dish that had won her over time and again, creamy risotto, infused with saffron and sprinkled with grated Parmesan. In those moments of stirring, I allowed the rhythmic motion to soothe my frazzled nerves. I thought of the last time we had shared a meal together where laughter danced easily across the table, but with that thought came the tightness in my chest, the reality that what once thrived between us was wilting, decomposing into bitterness. When Emma walked in, her brows knitted in confusion over the unexpected spread. "You cooked?" she asked, her voice intrigued yet laced with uncertainty. I wanted her to delight in the gesture, to feel the warmth of our past artist's heart, but the silence returned, wrapping around us as she approached the table. The bustle of the world outside felt distant now, the laughter of neighbors muted by the tension inside these four walls. As we sat down, we traded awkward glances that spoke volumes of the barriers we had built. I faltered, searching for the right words, but my throat seemed to close up. I forced myself to speak. I thought we could use a night to reconnect. My voice was barely a whisper, but the moment hung heavy with uninvited discomfort. Emma regarded her plate, and I noticed the way her fingers trembled before she spoke. "I don't think we're in a place to reconnect right now," she murmured, her gaze still fixated on the food. As though the words were heavy stones she struggled to lift. Her admission felt like an anchor, dragging me into the depths of the ocean filled with despair. I dropped my fork, the clatter echoing ominously in the silence, and I could barely hold back the surge of emotion that threatened to spill over. "Why?" I pressed, emotions raw as they boiled over. "Why are you pushing me away? Why can you not even talk to me?" Emma's shoulders seemed to cave in, the poise she wore slipping away as she finally looked me in the eyes. "Because," she started slowly, struggling to formulate her thoughts, "there's nothing left to say that wouldn't hurt us both more." The anguish evident in her expression twisted the knife deeper, and I was left grappling in the disarray of her admission. That night, the silence returned, heavier than ever, wrapping us in a cocoon of unfulfilled longing. I turned toward the darkness of our bedroom, my sanctuary transformed into a place of isolation. My heart ached for our love, yet felt the sharp sting of betrayal clawing at my insides. Lost in the thickening weight of denial, I finally resolved to take the step I had been contemplating, a quiet escape from the shackles of this once beautiful life, grasping at liberation, even as the thought left a bittersweet taste upon my tongue. In that moment, I recognized that I needed to reclaim the shattered pieces of my spirit, embracing the unknown that awaited me. The haunting echo of her unspoken words fueled my fire, igniting the courage I desperately needed to face the painful truth. Leaving was the only option that would set us both free. Yet, the flame ignited by despair also flickered with the hope of renewal, urging me on a journey of self-discovery that felt poised to unfurl amidst the ashes of our love. On the day Emma left for her work trip, the air felt stifling, pregnant with unuttered goodbyes. My mind raced as I stood in the dimly lit bedroom, overwhelmed by an urgency that wrapped around my heart, compelling me to liberate myself from this suffocating existence. Each box I filled became a sanctuary for the tangible remnants of a life I once cherished, an existence now tarnished by whispers of infidelity. I meticulously folded my t-shirts, Emma's favorite, a soft blue one frayed at the hem, went in first. Memories bloomed like hidden flowers, each stitch tethering me to moments we shared, lazy sleeps under warm blankets, mornings bathed in golden sunlight where every word felt like sweet poetry. Yet now, those treasured memories felt like chains dragging along the ground behind me, heavy and suffocating. The finality of packing stripped bare everything I had held dear, thrusting me deeper into a chasm of sorrow and determination. On the kitchen table, nestled among half-hung pictures of our smiling faces, lay my wedding ring, a glimmering symbol of promises exchanged and dreams woven together, now rendered hollow before me. My fingers lingered over the band, recalling the laughter that danced in our eyes during that sun-soaked afternoon. The thought sent pangs of nostalgia coursing through me, yet bitterness curled its sharp, dark tendrils around my chest, a reminder of the fractured trust that now lay in pieces at my feet. With a heavy heart, I laid the ring down next to a short note, his words tumbling out in jagged shapes, scrubbing clean the mess my love had become. I wrote how my love was no longer a shield against her betrayal, but rather a burden I could no longer carry. Yet even as the ink dried on the page, I felt how inadequate it was to encapsulate my abyss of emotion. No arrangement of syllables could convey the raw pain or the intricate thread of memories tangled with mistrust. The pain unfurled further, knotting tightly around my thoughts, choking the last lifeblood of our relationship. The drive away from that apartment, now infused with shadows where warmth once thrived, felt surreal. With each mile that separated me from our shared nightmare, I could almost taste the relief that soon wrapped around me, a modest consolation draped in the fabric of uncertainty. Tears stung my eyes, unwelcome and fierce, as I maneuvered through avenues once familiar. I stumbled upon memories that flickered in the corners of my mind, a montage illustrating a love story frayed at the seams. I wanted to remember the laughter that we had shared, not these specters of deceit. As I stepped onto the ranch owned by Ree, the mountains loomed close, their silhouettes etched against the endless sky. A stark contrast to the clutter of my former life, they greeted me with untouched terrain, inviting me to carve out a space for myself. The air there was rich with the aroma of pine and earth, the wild world exploding in color as if it had been waiting for me to acknowledge its beauty. I took a deep breath, lungs filling with fresh air, as if I were shedding the weight of despair that had followed me like a shadow. Running soon became my retreat. The rhythmic pounding of my feet on the earth felt primal, grounding me, connecting me to the pulse of life I was eager to reclaim. Each step propelled me further from the pain, a cathartic release swirling around in the wild winds, mingling with the scent of the earth's renewal. The mountains sang to me in whispers of courage and strength, igniting a fire inside, a message emanating from the landscape that no matter how deep the ache, healing awaited me in the embrace of nature, 1 mile at a time. But even in that vast freedom, echoes lingered of the life I had left behind. In quiet moments, when solitude cloaked the ranch, Emma's presence haunted me like a ghost brushing against the corners of my mind. I remembered her laughter, how it rang out like sweet notes in a melody, even as it loomed like a specter in the recesses of my heart. I felt the visceral tug of longing, the what-ifs gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. I ached not just for her, but for the person I had become amidst her betrayal. Who was I without her to lean against? There were nights when I lay in a new bed, my heart still racing. The stars twinkled above me in silent testimony, a vast tapestry of my uncertain journey unfolding. I missed the warmth of Emma beside me, yet the quiet urged a voice to rise from deep inside, a whisper of freedom teasing me toward growth, promising renewal. Perhaps instead of languishing in the sorrow of loss, I could transform my pain into possibilities. Yet, with each emerging thought, a familiar wave of dread crashed against my resolve, sending me spiraling into a cycle of doubt. Would I always carry the scars of betrayal woven into my being? It felt daunting, but better to dive into the storm of being than to exist in a languishing heartache. My journey had only just begun, and in those isolated moments, I started digging deep within, seeking to understand the fractures left by Emma's choices. My existence had to take on a new hue, a path unveiled by accepting the uncertainty of what lay ahead. I could run, not away from my past, but courageously toward a reclamation of myself, fully armed to confront the fear that clung to my consciousness. Finally severing the bond Emma had around my heart was my first victory, but the journey of healing was one I needed to brave on my own, stripped of her echoes, claiming my identity once again amid the Colorado mountains that stood as witnesses to my rebirth. In the embrace of nature, I began to see it clearly. The silhouettes of my past were softening, the pain settling into something more profound, and anticipation mingled with hope unfurling gently, promising that beyond this storm lay the possibility of a dawn yet to come. I stood on the brink of something new, something I could shape in my image, a chance to reforge the broken pieces of my spirit into a mosaic shimmering with new dreams. The mountains echoed with affirmation as I faced the horizon, readying myself for whatever lay ahead in this newly charted territory of my life. Weeks transformed into a suffocating silence, each passing day deepening the chasm that had widened between me and Emma. The initial shock of departure gave way to a gravity that weighed heavily on my heart, pulling me deeper into the abysses of my own thoughts. She had been the sun in my sky, and now, without her light, I found myself wandering in uncharted darkness, where echoes of laughter once danced freely. When her messages first came, they were frantic and desperate, a barrage of emotional pleas that landed upon me like rain in a drought. "Please call me back. I'm so sorry," one text read, the misspelled words fraying at the edges of her remorse. I could almost hear her voice trembling through the screen, the vulnerability lurking within as she poured her heart onto the digital page. I wanted to respond, to offer her a lifeline, but my fingers instead curled into fists, a physical manifestation of the storm raging inside me. I pressed down on the keypad, willing myself to resist. But the words that came to me were not the ones I longed to offer. Weeks seemed to stretch as I lay in silence, adrift in my new sanctuary. The mountains, looming and majestic, became my solace. I made the routine of running a part of my healing, escaping from the turmoil that surged like a tempest within. Each stride carried me further away from the remnants of our marriage, the heavy weight of memories held in place by 1,000 tiny chains forged from betrayal. The crisp air filled my lungs, invigorating me as I took to wild trails that spiraled away from everything I thought I knew. I allowed myself indulgent thoughts of freedom and release as my feet pounded against the earth, the rhythm echoing my heartbeat, a primal connection to the world around me. In those moments, as the landscape whisked by in a blur, I embraced the pain, channeling it into empowerment, forcing it out through sweat and grit. Nature became both my refuge and my teacher, its rugged beauty teaching me resilience, beckoning me to cast off the chains of my memories that once clung so tenaciously to my heart. Despite my newfound distance from Emma, her specter never fully left me. No matter how much I buried myself in my surroundings, her texts continued to invade my pristine solitude. Moments of longing transformed into waves of resentment, and I instinctively programmed her number into my phone's block list. Severing her reach is a form of self-preservation. Blocking her mother, too, felt necessary, an act of liberation, a way to erase the connection that suffocated me. Yet there were evenings too quiet, too still, when the mountains cast long shadows upon the ground, and the stars blinked mockingly above. Alone and enveloped in loneliness, I allowed melancholy to settle inside me, the weight sometimes pressing firmly against my chest. In those moments, feelings of inadequacy flickered like distant fireflies, sending my thoughts racing. Had I ever truly known her? The memories suddenly became muddied, intertwining gleeful laughter with shadows of deceit. Who was I without Emma in my life, the companion who had shared my dreams and fears? Who could I become now that I was free from her grasp? One night, as I lay on the grassy knoll outside my trailer, the moon bathed the world in an ethereal glow, and I fought the urge to simply dissolve into the night, become one with the vastness rather than deal with the internal tumult swirling within. The stars felt like countless other worlds, each one telling a story as unique as my own. They beckoned me, their flickering lights infusing hope into the shadowy corners of my heart. I began realizing there was beauty in the solitude, a chance to discover layers of myself that had slowly eroded beneath the weight of our once cherished union. Emma's absence was palpable. It was a bittersweet echo that rang hollow in moments of quiet. I started finding solace amid this inner chaos, recognizing that the longing and grief intertwined. After all, love isn't merely an essence of joy. It encapsulates loss too. My heart was slowly adjusting to this duality, understanding that while Emma had once been the center of my universe, I no longer had to orbit around her gravity. I could redefine who I was amidst the shards of our past, rebuilding perhaps even stronger through this unraveling heartache. No longer would I cling to the flickering embers of our lives together that were doused in ashes of betrayal. I began noting these musings in a journal, allowing the ink to flow freely onto the pages, extracting all doubts into a tangible form. It became a ritual, a way to articulate my tumultuous journey, and each writing session evolved into catharsis, unraveling the threads binding me to a painful past, my cathartic release, pouring out emotions I hadn't even allowed myself to feel until now. Her name was still a weight in my stomach, an unsettled residue that led me to questions that had no immediate answers. I confronted the bitter reality of Emma's choices, feeling anger well up like bile rising from the depths of my throat. I was forced to grapple with the fact that someone I loved had shattered the fabric of our trust. But even through this turmoil, the mountains continued to stand as steadfast witnesses to my evolution. Perhaps this was what healing meant, recognizing the shadows while fighting to step into the light. I thought about how Emma's betrayal didn't have to define my future, nor did it have the power to strip me of my identity. The whisper of hope was intense, urging me forward as I started imagining new dawns, ever so slightly more radiant than the last. A reminder that while bonds can break, they also create space for new opportunities to grow. Still unable to shake the memories, I focused on action, on reclaiming autonomy over my life. The ache in my heart wasn't something I could wish away, but I was determined to nurture it into a tender understanding, an acceptance that transformation was underway. I had to trust that in time, I could reforge the pieces of my spirit into something vibrant, resilient, and entirely mine. The promise of tomorrow began beckoning me, a siren song saying it was okay to hope, to dream anew. I was on the precipice of something beautiful. I just had to allow the healing to run its course. And perhaps, with time, I could reclaim not just the man I was before her, but the man I was destined to become in this brave, wild world that awaited me just beyond the mountains. One afternoon, as the light filtered softly through my trailer's worn curtains, a familiar chime interrupted my solitude. I glanced at my phone, half expecting it to be another notification about the weather or a reminder to hydrate as I ventured into the unpredictable terrain of my emotions. Instead, the stark white of the email screen brought a rush of disbelief. My heart raced as I read the words, "Uncontested divorce from Emma." It arrived almost ceremoniously, like an unexpected gift I never expected or wanted. Grateful relief washed over me, confusion mixed with the freedom that enveloped my heart like a warm blanket. I sat back gingerly, processing the weight of the words, the gravitas of this final stitch being sewn into the fabric of our shared life. The decision had been made. No more sleepless nights spent replaying the moments of her betrayal in my mind. No more silence stinging the air between us. I felt almost weightless as I shuffled through the contents of my trailer, the stacks of belongings demanding attention as the clutter of memories lingered. I had spent weeks drifting through the remnants of our past, savaging the emotional territory that had settled heavily in my chest. The taste of grief now seemed less bitter, more like that fading sweetness that urged me on, a bittersweet invitation to carve out a space that was solely mine. Lest I forget the pain, I took a deep breath, allowing the crisp mountain air to fill my lungs, reminding me of the new freedom I craved. The comforting scent of pine and earth swirled around me, grounding me while lifting my spirit. I emerged outside, leaving my worries behind, where the world expanded into an endless horizon of possibilities. Each suitcase I filled became a testament to my trampling on past hurts, packing away fragments of the life I held so tightly, the marriage that had turned to ash. I tightened my grip on the handle of an old duffel bag adorned with nicks and frays. Outside, the sun spilled golden light across the sprawling wooden deck. I dropped the bag at my feet and stepped to the edge of the porch, staring into the churning mixture of greens and browns that made up the surrounding landscape. This was not just the world I inhabited. It was my canvas, my new beginning painted in shades of hope. During moments of quieter reflection, I found myself indulging in the small victories of these new days. I began to make a life among these mountains, using them as both a backdrop and a catalyst for growth. Each evening, I would sit with a cup of herbal tea, letting the aromatic steam swirl around my thoughts like a comforting embrace, guiding me deeper into my reflections. I surrounded myself with friends who infused levity into my life, almost all too eager to pull me away from the weight of introspection. Among them was Lucy, a young woman with laughter that danced like fireflies on a summer night. We met during a community event at a nearby park, and our conversations felt like breathing for the first time. There was no rush, no pressure to impart significant meanings to our interactions, just the uncomplicated joy of making connections. Each moment we shared felt like a gentle reminder that life could be playful and expansive again. "Have you ever thought about signing up for the local hiking group?" she asked one day, a glimmer of mischief in her eyes as we shared lunch under a sprawling oak. The shade offered refuge from the harsh sun, but the laughter we exchanged felt bright enough to pierce the afternoon heat. I never considered it, I admitted. I think I'm still figuring out how to stand on solid ground myself. "Exactly," she said, leaning in closer with an earnestness that drew me in. "That's the best time to throw on a backpack and find where the trails take you. You can't be lost if you're in motion." It became an anthem in my life, a call to action that echoed within me. It was as if she was urging me to leave behind both my memories of Emma and the binds of my past. I decided to take Lucy's advice, immersing myself in camaraderie with people eager to chart their own paths in the wilds of the mountains. In the following weeks, I joined the group, discovering the thrill of stepping into unknown trails while bracing for the unknown. The camaraderie was invigorating. Every peak scaled or tricky river crossed felt like conquering a long-lingering sadness lurking in the depths of my heart. Nature, too, became a teacher, a fiercely wild companion offering lessons in resilience. With each hike, I felt more empowered, shedding layers of doubt and stepping into a newfound identity. And although Emma's shadow still clung to me in moments of silence, I realized that shadows were merely reflections of light, a reminder of the past rather than a prison. The core of my being began to shift. Anger and sadness morphed slowly into a quiet acceptance of what had been. One step at a time, I unfurled myself into a tapestry of life that was no longer tied just to her. The waves of sadness would sometimes crash upon me, unexpected and turbulent, like a sudden storm rolling in from over the mountains. But I grasped tightly to the hope of transformation. I leaned towards healing not just as an endeavor, but as an exploration, a journey to discover versions of myself that had yet to be unveiled. Despite the scars that etched themselves into my soul, there emerged bright patterns of resilience waiting to evolve. I had confronted my grief with honesty, surrendered my fears and frustration to the wilderness around me, and embraced the freedom that came with knowing I held the power over my destiny. Emma's affair had initiated a cascade of events that redefined me, but I had resolved to turn those same events into milestones marking the path towards self-discovery. And so I continued to run, through the mountains, past the valleys, and along the rivers, savoring the liberation I fought so fiercely to reclaim. I emerged from the shadows, chasing the light ahead, drawing strength from every step, knowing my journey was only just beginning. It was a warm day in early spring when I found myself seated at a small cafe, reflecting on my history while sipping the rich aroma of brewed coffee. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The earthy notes of the drink lingered on my tongue, each sip awakening something vibrant inside me. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, casting a golden hue on the rustic wooden tables, and life buzzed gently around me, friends gathering, laughter spilling, familiar faces exchanging greetings. I leaned back, savoring the moment, enveloped in a cocoon of normalcy, a world that felt infinitely broad. But all of that melted away in an instant when Emma walked through the door. My heart stuttered, the rhythm of my contentment disrupted as she entered, searching the crowd with a mixture of dread and hope etched across her features. Today of all days, I had finally begun to exhale the heaviness of our past. I had begun to carve a path for myself, and the sight of her drew me back into troubled waters. Her eyes locked onto mine, and time slowed as if the universe were conspiring to stretch this moment into infinity. I instinctively opened my arms, a reflex I couldn't combat despite what lay between us, only to see her extend her hand hesitantly, as if anticipating my rejection. A wave of emotions crashed over me: conflict, sadness, anger, and a deep-seated pity, as I reluctantly accepted the invitation to move closer, to contour the shores of a life we once shared. Settling down on a bench outside, I watched her struggle with a turmoil that mirrored my own. She began pouring out her heart, each word a jagged breath as she recounted the downfall of her life post-separation, her voice choked with remorse. "I've desperately been looking for you, Scott," she confessed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears that gleamed under the midday sun. "Since you left, I fell apart. The guilt haunted me, took root like poison. With each utterance, I felt the remnants of our connection rush back at me like a tempest. Inside, chaos lurked. No longer was I that man who clung to dreams of a happy marriage. Instead, I was a vessel for her sorrow. What do you want from me, Emma?" The words escaped my mouth before I could swallow back their bite. I felt a flicker of anger dance within me, challenging her attempts to navigate the sea of emotions we once traversed together. "I want you back. I need to explain how everything shattered," she pleaded, searching my face for forgiveness. "I made mistakes, and You think I don't know that?" I interrupted, my voice harsher than intended. "You shattered us, Emma. You shattered me. How do we build a bridge where there used to be walls? You don't just throw words like, 'I'm sorry,' and expect everything to return to normal." Her expression faltered, a thin veneer of resolve fracturing before the intensity of my outrage. I could see her thoughts coiling tightly around my words, the guilt she bore for her betrayal tugging at her shoulders, forcing her to bow before the weight of our shared history. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, her voice cracking like fragile glass. "He was just an escape. I didn't think of the consequences." An unsettling mixture of pity and rage flowed through me, piercing the heart of my resolve. The old pain I tried so diligently to bury sprang forth, intertwining with a burgeoning resolve. "Emma, it's not about whether you meant to hurt me. What happened, happened. And here we are, two people lost in the wreckage of something that was once so beautiful." The cafe around us buzzed with life, unaware of the emotional maelstrom unfolding just outside. The air hung thick, and I tried to reestablish the boundaries I had fought to define in the sanctuary of my age-old sorrow. But as I gazed into her tear-filled eyes, I recognized that they held depths of remorse that could not be dismissed lightly. I took a deep breath, realizing I couldn't plunge into the depths of mutual blame without drowning myself as well. For a fleeting moment, I recalled the laughter we once shared over cups of coffee like this, and how on those nights our dreams felt tangible, alive. But now the specter of her betrayal clouded it all. I won't lie to you, I confessed, my voice softer, the ball of tension in my chest gradually loosening. It's hard to reconcile the woman I once loved with the one who was unfaithful. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still angry. Angry at you, and angry at myself for the way everything spiraled. Silence enveloped us, as heavy as her heart, and for a moment I too felt the weight of the memories pulling me under. The cafe noises became a distant hum, drowning in the flood of my thoughts. Emma sat there, her fingers curling tightly around her coffee cup as she sipped down the liquid warmth, tears misting her eyes. The affair, it haunted me, Scott, she finally said, her voice tremulous yet steadying under the burden of honesty. I kept thinking about how I had betrayed not just you, but myself. How could I have been so foolish? I felt a twinge of empathy blossom amid my anger, a reminder that the fractures in our relationship resonated within both of us. It was as if the innermost layers of hurt began to peel away, exposing our vulnerability. You weren't just foolish, Emma. You were searching for something you already had, and when you found it absent, you turned towards darkness instead of light. Her head dropped, and I could see the reflection of my words echoing in the shadows of her heart. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she murmured, her voice cracking. But it's true. I did everything wrong. All I can do is hope that somehow we can find a way to forgive. I shifted uncomfortably, the weight of that word palpable. Forgiveness was a high summit I had yet to scale, one I feared might be a lifetime journey. I remained silent. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting elongated shadows as we sat together on that bench, two souls bound by love and betrayal, wrestling with the remnants of shared past. But now, as I gazed at Emma's anguished face, I knew that this moment mattered. In these minutes, amid the chaos and conflict, there lay an opportunity, an allure of choice tugging at my heart. I was forced to question everything. Did I want to keep my heart locked away, shielded from the risks of love, forever chilled by the pain of the past? I inhaled deeply, catching a whiff of the coffee that echoed Emma's proximity. It's complicated, I finally admitted, threading my fingers through my hair in exasperation. But I can't pretend it doesn't hurt. Not right now. Across the cafe, the bucolic atmosphere retreated into the background as I tuned into her wounded gaze. It beckoned starkly, an invitation to revisit the past with eyes unclouded by betrayal, yet firmly rooted in reality. But as I took that contemplative leap, I felt a gnawing frustration, an uncertainty about whether I would move forward, even tentatively, after the habits of our hearts shifted so profoundly. As the last sliver of sunlight kissed the horizon and the cafe began to empty, I remained anchored in that moment, gazing at Emma with eyes that searched for something, clarity, a resolution, perhaps even the kernel of hope that could light the way forward. But for now, all I felt was the weight of history pressing upon me, the delicate dance of moving on intricately woven against the memory of love lost and the uncertainty of love sought again. As we talked, the tension grew palpable, but I could hear the echoes of our shared history. Emma's words came like shards of glass, jagged and cutting, yet I could hear the reflection of what we once had lacing through her protest for forgiveness. I've made mistakes, she said, her voice trembling barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I need you to understand that I was lost, chasing shadows, and it wasn't about you. It was about me. For a moment, her statement hung in the air between us like an unsung melody. I wanted to feel the stirrings of compassion, that impulse to forgive that could bridge the gulf created by her infidelity. I felt a momentary flicker of longing, the ember of a dying flame that once burned brightly between us. But within me also loomed the truth that our love was a once glorious flame, now extinguished and ashen, the remnants of which lingered like smoke. No, I said gently, careful as I spoke, measuring my words like well-practiced battlegrounds. I cannot forgive the hurt that taints our love, Emma. You turned away from us, from everything we built. The finality of my words sat heavily in the air as I fought the urge to reach for her, a gesture that seemed both comforting and cruel. Her reaction was swift and heartbreaking. A sob escaped her lips, raw and consuming, and in that moment, her carefully constructed facade crumbled. I fought against the instinct to draw her close, to soothe the pain I had once vowed to heal. Instead, I remained rooted, staring at her through a haze of mixed emotions, a blend of anger, sadness, and an undeniable, persistent love that flickered like a candle in a storm. I didn't want any of it to happen, she gasped. tears streaming down her face like a river of regret. I was weak, Scott. I thought I could find something I lost, but all I did was destroy everything. There was a sincerity in her words, a tempest of guilt and anguish that twisted at my heart. I felt the tight coil of anger ease, replaced by an unsettling compassion I didn't want to feel. Do you even see the damage you've caused? I asked, my voice biting but laden with despair. The way you ripped apart the life we worked so hard to build. You can't just wave away the memories, the trust that you shattered. That's the thing, Emma said, her voice breaking as she spoke. I live with that burden every day. I see it every time I close my eyes, every time I reach for the person I used to be. Her vulnerability struck me, reminding me of the woman I once adored, the idealist who danced through life with a fierce joy. Yet now, like a withered plant caught in a drought, she felt distant, unmoored from her own desires. I shifted in my seat, the weight of her admission folding into the shadows of my heart. You weren't just foolish, Emma. You were searching for something you already had, and when you found it absent, you turned towards darkness instead of light. The delicate ricochet of our feelings reverberated through the air. I could sense that she was grappling with something deeply enriching within herself, something both beautiful and tragic. The cafe buzzed around us, a swirling backdrop of laughter and chatter as life pressed on, blissfully ignorant of the hurricane swirling at this tiny table where we sat. I focused on Emma, on the rise and fall of her breaths, on the way her fingers trembled around her cup, as if willing it to offer clarity or salvation. The flickering lights overhead cast a glow on her tear-streaked skin, illuminating the regret etched across her features. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she confessed, pain evident in her posture as she slumped, defeated and heavy, like a painting left to fade. But I want to try to make amends. I'm terrified that if I don't at least try, I'll lose the best thing that ever happened to me. I looked at her then, the woman I had loved fiercely, the laughter and dreams of a shared future lingering like ghosts in the back of my mind. It was almost too much to bear, a concoction of longing, anger, and regret swirling together. It's not that simple, Emma, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. You don't just throw words like, I'm sorry, into the chaos and expect everything to return to normal. The silence that hung between us thickened, thick and suffocating, as we both grappled with the enormity of this moment, a double-edged sword of reconciliation poised precariously between love and betrayal. I could feel the weight of the words we hadn't spoken piling up between us, feeling like a barrage of unprocessed emotions that needed an avenue for release. Will you at least think about it? She whispered, her voice quaking. About a new beginning for us. The sincerity in her eyes pierced me through, unraveling the twisted knot of anger I had been holding onto for so long. The shadows of our past loomed large, but hidden within me was a soft glimmer that begged for recognition, the possibility of healing, of forgiveness, albeit perhaps not together. Whatever the outcome, I needed time to process, not just for Emma, but for myself. We fell into a strained quiet, enveloped in an uncomfortable recognition of our own frailty. Torn between griping desires and mounting resentment, I realized that healing was not the path I expected. It would require time, perhaps even strength to take a few steps back and confront the roiling emotions I had buried beneath waves of misjudgment. As I rose to leave, I lingered for a moment, staring into her vulnerable face, catching the trickle of moonlight painting shimmering highlights on her profile. This was hard, Emma. But I can't let you pull me back into something I need to step away from. Her expression shifted, an understanding blooming in her eyes, tempered with sorrow, one that felt like an unanticipated parting. I turned slowly, aware of her lingering gaze piercing my back, a weight that followed me as I walked away. It was time to let go, to redefine my boundaries, and to prioritize my own path forward. With each step, the remnants of our bittersweet history collided against the certainty of my choice. Love and hurt were now intertwined threads of my narrative, and amidst the pain emerged a more profound realization. Sometimes, the most potent form of love is the courage to release what no longer serves us, and allowing ourselves the grace to find solace beyond the ashes of what was.